We have the conversation, but may I also invite Christophe, Azu, Gökhan to participate in the debate. I don't know if we still have other speakers of today. Maybe also take a chair. We make a group session out of this question.
I just have a very specific question for the magazines, so for the two editors. So we talk about architecture. I mean, we've seen actually very well in one of the projects, the Düzce project, which Hülya showed about after the earthquake, how this whole initiative happened. And in the end, you say, okay, the architecture might not be brilliant, but this is what people need. And for me, this underlines actually something which is quite relevant. I mean, an architectural magazine, let's be honest, architects buy it, or usually architects buy it, students buy it, whether they read it or not is then, of course, another discussion. But we talk about public, to make things for public, and then as the editor-in-chief of two magazines, each of you, how do you deal with this communication problem? Because the public we talk about is only addressed at most at the moment of decision in a referendum, or they're offer the project, they can give their opinion. But actually there's I think, quite big gap between architecture quality as we architects understand it and talk about in these discussions, and the architectural quality we hope people would understand, and the one they don't actually know, because of course professional publications go between professionals. So do you have any methods or visions about how to deal with this? How accessible are actually the magazines, the professional ones, or is it rather the newspaper? Is it the internet? Do you have any experience about that to share?
It is a huge problem in the sense that what you find in glossies and newspapers, etc., has also lost a lot of its qualities. I remember, like 20 years ago, for instance, you could still read in NRC Handelsblad or newspapers like that, you could still read very long texts about urbanism, about cities, about architecture, that really went to the heart of the matter and could really pinpoint questions that were at hand. That has gone lost a little bit, and but I think, well, at least I hope that you might again conquer field if you open up at least the architectural reviews themselves to other opinions than only those of architects, because somehow if you pull in the debate within the architectural field of outsiders, they might also bring the thing back out again, so out of the field. But that's of course a kind of wish, and I mean, it's something you won't undo or change in a day. And now there's one other thing, of course, that architects are very obsessed with a certain type of aesthetics, which I think a lot of people don't care about that much. And actually I don't care much about the fact that most people don't care about that. So I think, like, yeah, well, sometimes, it's great if architects have their own fantastic things, and they will survive somehow, but don't expect that everybody will follow. It's just like other, in that sense, it's a bit similar to art, like some people follow, others don't, whatever.
So you're saying actually two things at the same time. On the one hand, maybe the magazine needs to be reinvented in order to communicate with other publics, as newspapers don't do it anymore. But on the other hand, the magazine is also a platform catering to a specific discussion that is professional in the discipline, and that doesn't necessarily, cannot always be also geared towards...
No, it can show things that are exceptional, singular, that are probably very hard to catch on immediately, but that have their importance in themselves as a kind of things can be inspiring without for that reason having an immediate effect. So it's different fields in which you operate.
I think there are also two ways to it. And also in the architecture community itself is not very much concerned with the architectural stuff going on in the daily life. So, for example, like this, there was this elevator accident in a construction site that took like 10 people died, and this was not a subject in the architecture media. So this was a subject in the general media, because the architecture profession itself loves to close upon itself. So it's a closed discussion, and like the design of that building might be interesting for the architecture community, but I mean, people dying in the construction site is not a topic for the architecture community also, not because the architecture media is not concerned with it, also the people, when you see them, they're not talking about it. So it's I think this is not only a discussion on the media, it's also a discussion about how the architecture loves itself positioned in the general public. It's kind of like they love having this closed community of like having their own aesthetics, understandings, and so on. So on the other hand, yeah, it's not only the architecture community like loving themselves, having this closed community, also the public distances themselves from that. So, for example, when I think about the Turkish example, it's not logical to expect the general public to have an architectural culture, because they have not been educated in quality buildings, they have not been living in quality houses, they have not seen proper urban spaces. So it's, I mean, through your whole life almost, you are exposed to this low quality architecture. So how can you expect them to have higher expectations of architecture? So I think this is a very multi-dimensional discussion.
Aspect.
Yeah. Just an old joke we used to say at the office that we say we don't do architecture to be in A+. We say that for 10 years, I think. But that was really a purpose, because
change that.
But we've been in it.
Change that or change up?
So
no, come back to it.
So the one time.
Come back.
But one day came a journalist of A+ just to make a report of our office, and the first things we said were, and it was wrote on. There's news to say they don't do architecture. But just a joke, just to say that it's very difficult. Just you talk about one in price, you talk about aesthetic. And when you act, you have the eyes of a kind of elite, architectural elite, no? The group elites. And sometimes you have really to... I know some of other architects were really, I would say that, under the pressure of that. You know? It's so difficult to... And so I think you have to be free at one time of that. That's why we say that. We say we want to be free, we just want to act, and we don't care about the... So I think we know, if we want to think now about internet, about Facebook, about the interactivity, I think it's another way to speak about architecture, and we really have to surf on that, because the debate is interesting, more than the eyes of the elite, which was in the past. I'm sure you will do another, and I saw the person I wrote it for the first time in a few years. It was very interesting because you speak about urban planning. So I was reading it for the first time in a few years. So thank you for the good job. Yes, I had. So it's
but the way you are talking about this now is that the magazine has an important role. You said also in the general debate, general public debate, in fact there is a lot of debate that could concern architecture that is not. I tend to agree with this also in Belgium. There's never been as much debate in newspapers on subjects that are close to architecture, but always without any architect involved in that debate. And I think it's an intriguing observation that there's a very famous or unfamous Dutch architect called Rem Koolhaas, who says we need to develop public intellectuals, or the architect as a public intellectual, we have very few of those. We have developed a culture in which we have a lot of fantastic architectural production, but very little debate in that architectural world and very little debate between that architectural world and the outside world. My question would be, you're all involved, have been involved or are involved in education. Magazines are one thing, they are a platform, but education is also something where you have a room full of people that have been educated or are being educated, I assume. How do you see the role of education? Because that's where we actually see the image reproduction that you mentioned, Pieter, really taking the lead, you could say. I observe it on a daily basis in education. Is that the place, Azu, Gökhan, where you see really something that can change?
Well, there are some encouraging examples still of good education. There's two things I've seen some, well, the situation I know is of course the one in Ghent, I know best at least. There's some seminars they have on quite a regular basis, especially in the master years, in which they quite critically go over plans or exhibitions, etc., to really try to disentangle what is at stake, not what kind of images are produced, but how they are produced and to what ends they serve. So there is this kind of critical conscience that is at least, I would say, developed, and that also reflects on studios. It's there. Now, it's always, of course, a very tricky thing because education. When I had a studio, I always thought that I learned as much from some students, not from all of them, than they learned from me. Education is a very bizarre process.
Two-directional.
It's very two-directional, at least. I feel it that way.
Azu?
Well, I'm an outsider to architectural education.
But educating also architects, or are you also involved in the education of architects?
No, I'm not. I teach other students in other faculties. Never directly teaching architecture students, but I'm invited to master classes, juries, and also I try to involve architecture faculty, postgraduate studios in projects that we are doing, implementation-based projects that I am managing. So what I see is that still architecture functions like any other discipline, in fact, that they are totally tunnel vision. It's the tunnel logic, that architecture has a certain definition and that you have to develop your skills within that expertise area. So whereas when I come with my projects, they often have multidisciplinary needs. Thinking about water, thinking about agriculture, thinking about heritage, thinking about sports needs, community. So there are all kinds of different aspects to a project. And I'm surprised that today, in 21st century reality of multidisciplinarity, multitasking, flexibility, project management, area management, all these discourses, that architects, they stop and they say, right, this is not my task anymore. I will build this, let's say, bazaar building in a distant, faraway location in Istanbul, a marketplace, but I don't care if it's not used, for instance.
Yeah.
So this to me is really shocking that an architect doesn't care about whether this building that he designed so carefully is not commissioned. And he's not thinking why it's not commissioned.
But, well, to give you one hopeful thing then, was an architect who was teaching at the university in Hasselt recently had a kind of public lecture in which he made a case for not building. I mean, an architect is somebody who unlearns building and tries to explain people how not to build or to build as little as possible. And then and he said like, okay, we should try to develop means to pay ourselves to do this, to find ways to make this kind of sustainable practice for ourselves. And he's doing quite well doing it. So I mean, it's not. I think this idea that maybe we should stop making fantastic drawings, or not do it all the time at least, it's there. I think. I mean, we saw some examples today.
Can I bring it to the room, because I guess there's some students here. There were at least some students here. Do you recognize, or does somebody recognizes this situation? Teachers, educators, or others? Nobody recognizes this.
Okay, it was the exception.
So you'll get an award. Look, you know, the first one who starts talking is getting an award, and an article published in the magazine.
Somebody.
I actually have something to say about the involvement of the user of the public space, and like how basically it is supposed to be involved in the design process of the public space. And basically, in the project that I'm working with, I've like constantly found myself in this like two-sided question that I can't really answer. So basically, what I've been doing is simply observing people and how they're acting in the public space, and how like just all the spots in a certain given neighborhood are actually in use of the public space users. And I noticed that basically what I'm doing is totally not within the field of the predefined architecture in that sense. And I've been talking about this with a friend of mine, and basically said, what you are doing can be considered as architecture as well, because architecture doesn't have to be directly building, or just the end result doesn't have to be simply building. So all the observations, all the social relationships between users and how they interact with the built environment, or just simply with other people, can also be considered in the field of architecture. And this is something, for example, that I had never seen in the bachelor years of my education life, but I found this freedom in the master years. And so yeah, I think there is a certain contrast on how the educators or like the tutors of studios have a take on this matter of, I think there is a critical limit between just being too guiding or being too strict towards architecture students, and just letting them free and like guiding them as they go on with their own journeys, kind of.
Clear, for me, very recognizable, that in fact, in an education, on the one hand, you need basic skills as an architect, but the definition of what those basic skills are is very restricted. You could say part of what you call a tunnel vision. The question, I think, is maybe not whether we need to... The title of the conference is, and the title of this debate is, Changing Practices. Probably that's not the right frame for the debate, because it's not about changing the practice, I guess. It's much more about broadening the scope of what design can do. And I think that's a bit where you were, let's say, all pleading for, and exploring how, let's say, via design you can do something. But I think, and that's maybe what I wanted to give back to you, and also to the remark you made just now, the design practice is maybe, or put on the table, that's what I want to say, the design practice is something specific. It's not purely sociological, anthropological study. It's a project mode. You propose, you're in a kind of specific mentality which only design capacity has, which does not always lead to plans for specific built spaces, but which does have something that is about an analysis of a situation and a kind of injection or reframing of that situation. Does that maybe function as a kind of broadening scope of the praxis? Gökhan?
Well, yeah, we usually, I get very itchy, so to speak, whenever we have, for example, aesthetics become vilified. When aesthetics becomes vilified or stigmatized in itself. Well, aesthetics, it is about, again, how you use, because whenever you talk about the value of an architectural or artistic project, about the quality of a project, you're already in the realm of aesthetics. So it can be a political approach, it can be a different approach, and I can understand that there is this critical distance that we want to have in terms of the pornography of certain images, how certain architectural projects try to commodify themselves solely through cosmetic means. But that never should mean that we need to leave the realm of aesthetics forever, so to speak. And which is
but you're working and studying in an American context, which is world famous for its, let's say, to a certain extent, withdrawal of the design practice into academia, outside of an engagement with society, of defining the practice of design within the architectural canon. Your practice is very different. What I find interesting is that you actually combine both positions.
That's what I'm trying to say, of course. The political side is crucial to understand architecture. Architecture is not solely some kind of a cosmetic image, but at the same time, as you also made the point, there is a very immediate specificity in architecture and in art in terms of the aesthetics, in terms of the quality of the object and your design approach and so on. And it becomes very problematic for me whenever someone comes and says, okay, maybe the architect should not build. Or it is just like going to a musician and say, maybe you should not make music. So in the way that you construct your architecture, and through your architecture you make new ways and you make the subversion, not in this cynical, so to speak, position to get yourself a little bit distance back, and in such a sense that you cannot do anything, you become catatonic, so to speak, which would be very, I would say, a very problematic position. So in that sense, I think construction and at the same time conception and at the same time design are crucial, but in terms of its relationship and combination with a critical, approach, not taking one side or the other, but combining both.
And there you could say, and maybe I pass the word again to the magazine people, the way magazines read, analyze projects, often projects, and that's a typical quality of architects, is that they can present their own project as the perfect solution to a perfectly identified problem, which is of course never the case. Magazines have maybe the last years followed this rhetorics quite, how do you say that, without much resistance. Sheepishly. Would you agree or not? Because what you're talking about, if we say there's other aspects of the project mentality of the design discipline that are also crucial, it's not that they are not in projects that are published, it's that they are not highlighted in projects sometimes that are published. It's not that what we are presenting, reading, discussing, or not. In the project you showed, if you show the first project, Dushche, is that well pronounced? You show a process and you say, the architecture is maybe not the best, but the process is interesting. A magazine that says, sometimes we highlight this, the best projects are maybe also where process and architecture suddenly falls into place, because there was one architect who failed, but he installed a good process, and then there was a fantastic architect who took the place and so on.
I think one of the worst things that the architecture magazines are facing, that there is this whole tradition of architectural magazines. So it's the images that you publish, it's not the projects that you publish. So this is, we gotta accept this. Like the architecture is changing, the magazines are changing. And we also don't know the best way to do this stuff. I don't know. The layout is mostly based on the images. In the newspapers, it's the images that are the decorations. In the architecture magazines, the texts are the decorations for the images. So this has to change. So it's like the like the practices are changing, the magazines are going to change, because now it's like 5 years we are talking about all these participatory processes and so on. So it's actually new. So, and there's this, as I said before, there's this tradition of making an architecture magazine. So it's also going to change, and also people, as Pieter said, people are not reading it because they know what they are going to find it. I mean, it's just the inscription of the images mostly. So maybe that's the reason why they are not reading it anymore. I don't know, but it's going to change, I guess. It's not going to be these glossy images. Even the architectural photography is changing. I mean, think like 10 years ago, it was just the photos with no people in it. Now that there is this yeah.
Always the same bench of Mies van der Rohe.
Yeah, I mean.
Are there more questions?
I want to set something straight before this vilifying. I think you misunderstood me. I didn't say like we should stop building or so. That was not what I said, and that's not what Tim van der Weken in this case said. He says I mean, it's a much more complex argument, but he says like, before you do something, think not twice, but 5 times, and then maybe you can subtract something. But that's an action. It's as well an action, just to subtract something or to display something instead of always adding. And that's his point. And that can be very aesthetical. I mean, it's not an opposition. It's simply that it's what I think designing is about finding the place, the margin in which you can move. And so, while architecture is about stability, actually the thought process is about moving things and about bringing things into kind of intellectual, aesthetical motion, things that you set in motion. And that's where it happens. And of course there's a craft in it. It's not, that's for sure. I mean, I was maybe a bit too blunt in the way I explained it or put it forward. So
let's maybe take another point of view. We started this day with 2 introductions of 2 very different contexts. At least that's what the introductory text that we collectively wrote as organizers says. We have socio-demographically and socio-politically rather different contexts. During the whole day we did a kind of mirroring operation around subjects. Is the thing that pops up the difference in terms of context, or is the thing that pops up the kind of collective endeavors of 2 very different situations, collective challenges of 2 very different situations? Does it make sense to exchange practices, searches of practices, the way we did it? And does that say something about the discipline, rather than to say we have regional architectural qualities? Azu.
Yes, I think that is the second option, which is that even though the contexts are so different, that it seems that there is a critical mass which is presented here, which is looking for what is called changing practices here, what Hülya called alternative. I think you used the word alternative. I think it's because I'm trying to formulate, we have a big issue in Istanbul at the moment to do with how we are going to get around our thinking of Gezi Park. Okay? As today's proceedings are going on, I'm constantly thinking, how can I pose this question to the participants as to how we should be thinking about a public space which is so symbolic, so central, and we had this Gezi Occupy movement, and now it's again kind of sitting there waiting for this political grasp grasping and political shaping. So obviously we have things in common here. We are sitting, and so it's the articulating. What is it that we are looking for? That is common. Okay, what is it? So and I think that we can maybe approach it by. We need to talk about, for instance, something like Gezi Park, a public space, and what is it that we want there in Gezi Park? We have long discussions in Istanbul among architects, among planners, among people like you, activists, trying to get our head around it. And it would be nice to find some keywords. Leave this room with some little keywords, and what your project, for instance, of putting these white cubes, what I thought was very interesting. It's an opening, suggestive thing for Gezi, that what the architect is trying to do is maybe this thing about not building or thinking, is making people possible to think together. So what architects, research by design maybe, is that there are these tools, and architects are very good, perhaps, at getting people to think what is the common thing that we are trying to aspire towards. What is it that we try to articulate this? This is so difficult, articulating this common thing, right? And I find that architects are the best people. And this is a good compliment, isn't it?
I guess there's a second part of your sentence. Architects are the best people for university.
Right,
the best.
Just pass on the microphone. But
now you have to answer for.
What to say?
I'm lost. Yes, we are the best.
Well, yeah.
And for the Gezi Park discussion, and which goes back to May 68 and all these, I think it starts with May 68, but it is always a discursive beginning, so you can change it. We have this bottom-up, self-constitutive, self-organized movements in which people are not talking about solely one one teleological end. They are talking about many different desires and many different affections. And I think we usually miss the point, because it has many, again, dimensions, but we usually miss the point when we say that May 68 failed, when we say that Gezi Park failed, or the Gezi event failed, only in terms of their extensive relationship with the parliamentary politics and so on and so forth, which means after May 68, all of a sudden you have the goal and it becomes more conservative. After Gezi event, all of a sudden you have Recep Tayyip Erdogan and so on and so forth. It becomes more conservative. That is one part, of course, it's important. But you also have an intensive part, which means an affective part in which people already created these imaginings. After May 68, all of a sudden it became possible for feminism to arrive, for the gays and lesbians to talk for their rights. So it creates virtual openings in which other people go on and fill them with the different desires, the sexual, revolutionaries and so on and so forth. And right now, already, it is not about looking for one solution or how to define this, but we are already doing justice to Gezi, so to speak, or we are already operating on Gezi. Whenever we speak about this, whenever we write about this, we have many books and so on, researches. So that event creates its own, so to speak, children, and other people does and do different things with it. But insofar as we think in this very, so to speak, a Leninist framework, a very early 20th century, as if one event should change everything in the world and make it upside down, and all of us come to the fore and become cherishing and holding hands and everything is perfect, like a utopic paradise.
That's at the end of today. We will sing.
Yeah, that would be very naive. So these are very small cumulative parts.
To pick up what you said, Azu, and what you now added, in fact, what you say is, in fact, it changes the culture. Such moments of living and merely showing, testing, exploring citizenship in public space do not change the design of public space, what Pieter pointed to. So in a way it doesn't succeed, but it does succeed in changing the culture. Your question, Azu, what do we take home to a certain extent, all of us, to a very dangerous Brussels and a very safe Istanbul? For some of us, the public space as a design question is maybe not immediately the thing. We, as you, Pieter, you pointed, you said it's not about the redesign that then enables a kind of repoliticization of public space, but it's maybe a way and instruments and methods to set up public processes, or processes that, as you said at the beginning, reveal, share, organize public thinking processes. Maybe that's, I think, what we heard today, how things that are under the table can be brought up on top of the table, how they can be shared around the table, how they can be voiced and connected to aesthetics of representation that have nothing to do immediately with the building, literally, but about sharing the space. And I have the feeling that also in your work, Christophe, it's a lot about the organization of these public processes and how the project is, in fact, you said, in all the actors involved, I'm the architect, but in fact I placed the urban project in the middle as the kind of hinge, as the connector piece between all this. It's the public process that is there, which is the end result, let's say the core of the engine of the process, and not the project or the real transformation is not immediately the first thing that changes the culture and that leads to qualitative urban transformation. I don't know if you want to give a...
Yes, but public space is an empty space, which is very difficult. It's just to do the empty. So I remember when the Place Flagey was inaugurated with the minister, she said, for me it's a little empty. It was just incredible to hear that a public space is empty, minister. It was the same of the social housing. It was the same one, Françoise Dupuis. And so I think we're very afraid of the empty. And one of my conclusions of the experience of the walking model was that it's more easy to put cars than to open the space and to see what happens, because who is the first person who go to the public space? We can see in Turkey, politician, militant, I always forget, activists, and young people, poor people. In our country we see a lot of people from foreigners, people, and even the tourists. We don't want to see the tourists. For some people it's bad to see tourists in the center. It's Disneyization of so you open and you see what happens. So I don't know if we can do something of that. We architects, we're not God, it's like I say, we don't organize the society. We just try to open a window when the society will go in, and after what can we do, really? I think we're powerless about that. We just can look what's happening, and after what, put policemen, of course. People are drunk because they can just sit down on the floor and drink the beer. And so there's people who don't like this. And other people will not like to see the policemen, and we see now just right in a Piétonnier in Brussels because there's problem with the terrorists. And so the public space is open and we can't organize it. So it's very difficult to do it. Just to put a place to sit is something difficult in a public space. Because if you put it in front of a house, you can have a gathering of young people. Not only, you can have a gathering of old people. Old people going to speak in front of a house, and so it's disturb the people inside the house, and that's it. And it's not because they are right end of organizing the public space. It's very, very difficult. And I think we can't coordinate things. It's just as I said, we have to forget our ego. Open it's fantastic. We open the space. That's fantastic. And after we see what happened, and after the society, as I said to you too, as we saw so much criticized about the Piétonization in the center of Brussels, which is really mad, hysterical criticism. No nonsense. As I say, a feminist say you made a public space for the boy because you put ping pong tables, so it's for the boy. say, why the big portable stuff? Boy, it's not the architect's fault. We have to choose furniture, you know, and it's not, we are not doing the society, architect or urban plan designer are not making the society, we just do the furniture for the society.
But you say something very important. There's utilitarian uses of those spaces, car parking, car passing, shopping, and so on. Public space is about opening up a kind of unprogrammed, also what you actually, Gökhan, you actually brought it very clearly into the debate. That's actually a task, to open up a space is there.
And link, you open and you link. That's the two things. But so, as you said the first time, your first question is that if we are in the same context, of course we are in the same context, we can work anywhere, because all contexts are very complex. Brussels is complex, Istanbul is complex, and so of course we can.
So you can't
we
work
can
in less complex.
work on the same complexity anywhere. I guess so. So it's not a question of context. It's
So you're
a question
never
of
working-
complexity of public space of the project.
Okay. We round up this debate. I think we do get some common, and I do see confirmation in your reactions in the fact that there's common endeavors and there's common evolutions in the practice. There's also a common plea for the platforms that can actually highlight certain things, to highlight maybe other things than were highlighted the past decades, to put it simple, and actually to prepare for the next awards to not be won by only the imagery next to the body text, but also to something that is broader and deeper than something than what we have used in the past. And maybe in that sense it's interesting, we will read with a lot of attention your editorial, Pieter, for the next issue. And we see how much this day has actually not or has inspired you today. I think we round up the day here. I have to thank all of you for being here, starting with Azu, Benoit, Dieter Lezen, thank you wherever you are, Nadia Casabella for talking to us today, Gregor Thompson for having the intention to come but making the wrong decision, seeing what we have debated today, Gökhan, Christophe, Hülya, and Pieter. I thank you all for coming over to a very safe haven. Let's hope it stays like this. It's not finished yet. A safe haven for such a debate, a cultural session, a cultural setting which actually enables a debate, an exchange of practice, and not only you performing for a public, but in fact a kind of exchange of how you do things, what works, what don't, what does not work. Thanks for this. Thanks to Marie, Elodie, EUROPALIA, I don't know who's responsible, for organizing this together. I think it makes sense. I understood also the proposal of Azu in such a sense. The next session should be really a workshop. Let's try to extend our debates towards a kind of co-production of a Gezi Park strategy, public process. So I think we do have some work to be done, and we need to find more money from this fantastic EUROPALIA event to continue our work on a very neutral subject such as Gezi Park. I'm sure it will work in the framework of EUROPALIA. I hope you enjoyed it as a public, as a debate, as a kind of exchange. We are looking forward to your reactions, evaluations, and to a next session to continue this type of debate. There is a drink, I already said that. The forms are at the exit to fill in and to say good, half good, or really bad, and something more. There is a drink offered, as far as I know, if I'm not wrong, now to actually continue this conversation in a more informal setting, which is of course always the best setting to end the day. Thank you very much.
Right? I didn't have moments to contact them, but we would like to thank Joachim Declerk. He's done a fantastic job all day long, getting all these themes together, joining them, asking us very tough questions, and with this unending energy, So that was great. Thank you, and we want to continue. Thank you very much.